Thanks, Tina. Thanks, Kathleen. Hello, everyone. Really pleased to be here today. It's been a long time. It's really nice to see everyone in person. I wanted to give a little bit of context before Tina does the main presentation, because despite being a longtime partner of CORE, thanks, a little coaching from Isabel. Despite being a longtime partner of CORE and the strong roots of the origins of institutional repositories in the US, we actually don't have a regional network. We don't have a national network. We really don't have anything even approaching a network. And Tina will talk a little bit about some of the maybe reasons why that is the case, but we're a very large country, very little centralization in our higher education environment, and a whole lot of independence and pride in doing it our way on each independent institution and campus. And I think that at SPARC, we had hope for a long time that collaborations would kind of emerge naturally in the IR community. We sort of saw that happening around the world, but it's become very clear that absent a much more structured approach in the US, that's not going to happen. And right now we have a very interesting opportunity with the administration that's in place in the US. They are actually revisiting our research output sharing policy, and they're in the process of upgrading and updating it to become more reflective of a national open science policy. And in particular, we're very, very encouraged that they explicitly share our concerns at SPARC, and I think in the library community in the US as a whole, concerning the approaches for sharing in particular research articles. They have strong concerns about the inequities that come along with APC-based approaches and transformative agreements. So we want to work to capitalize on this moment in time by promoting institutional repositories as a better strategy. And specifically, we're pitching repositories to the federal government as a key part of our national research infrastructure. I just wanted to give a very quick +1, Kathleen, to the wonderful suggestion of a core contribution to the Open Government Partnership. One of the things that will be very helpful in us catalyzing and action in the US and actually getting a network going are strong international signals that our government will listen to. We are shamefully not a member state of UNESCO. So the wonderful UNESCO open science recommendations have very little weight for us. But we are a member and we do participate actively in the Open Government Partnership. So we would be delighted to contribute to that and also to pick it up and use that as kind of a motivator to catalyze the network even further. What I wanted to note was that for all these reasons at SPARC, we wanted to use this moment in time to really act and to really commit to catalyzing and to supporting a new regional network. And we want to intentionally build on the demonstrated successes of the networks that are such a key part of CORE. So at SPARC, we've made it a priority and we're resourcing it as such. We're going to continue to try to do that. Part of our resourcing has been to bring in a visiting program officer specifically to lead this effort for us. We don't want to do it with one corner of one person's brain. We wanted to bring somebody in who is dedicated for this. So we've hired Tina. We're empowering her to really kind of turn loose, learn from the community and get things going. And she'll talk a bit more in detail about where we are and where we're hoping to go. So thank you, Tina.
Thanks, Heather, for that context. I'll just add, Kathleen shared the results of the survey for the Modernizing the Global Repository Network at the beginning. And while all of those things are true in the US, what really rose to the top for the US respondents was the idea of we operate in silos, as Heather was indicating, and there isn't a great deal of coordination. So I went backwards. There we go. So we've spent a lot of time over the last 9 months or so, really trying to engage the community in developing a vision for US repositories, because building that trust and that community is essential, I think, to the success of the network long-term. So I want to talk a little bit about the community engagement efforts that we went through. So the first thing we did was really create an expert group, and we were really happy with the response we received. 63 people accepted our invitation to participate. All the US core members were invited, the SPARC steering committee members, other library leaders and repository managers, and then some consortia leaders within the US who have that experience in building communities and having shared services. So we were really intentional about trying to make sure we had different sizes of institutions and different regions represented within that group. So you can probably can't see the numbers, but you can see the pie is pretty well distributed across the enrollment and regional distribution. So the first thing we did with that expert group was survey them. And one of the questions that we asked, and I just wanted to highlight this, was their vision. What is your vision for the role of repositories in 5 years? And we did provide these 5 options for them to rank, and this is how they ranked them. And I think this is informative as we go through to see that they ranked being ensuring a more equitable and inclusive landscape, and being national research infrastructure were really the top 2 that they ranked. So I just wanted to share that. And then we took that survey information and broke them down into groups of about 12 people and did some exercises to get people thinking and talking about this and drawing out more of the information that people added in the survey. They had the option to add other parts of the vision, for instance, in that previous question that I showed. So I won't go through all of these exercises, but wrong way, there we go. One of the things that I thought was interesting as we went through was thinking about what is a repository network. People weren't sure what that meant even. And so we started asking people to share what they thought that meant. So that they could all see where each other was coming from and we could understand better. And I just wanted to highlight here that both human and technical aspects really came out as important to people as parts of the network. So it's not just a technical network, it's also a network of people. I also, after that expert group sessions, there are a couple of sort of pre-built communities, I guess, in the US, the Coalition of Open Access Policy Institutions, and then also the OpenCon Librarians community. So I went to their community calls and shared information and got feedback from them. And these just show the blue is the equitable and inclusive part of the vision. And the red is the national infrastructure part of the vision. So just showing that we're on track, right? Like everybody's agreeing so far on what's most important about the role of repositories. And then you'll recognize these themes. These were the themes that really came out in the course of those community calls. We've heard these over and over since we've been here. Inadequate staffing and technical expertise. So we still have these issues to deal with as well, particularly from the repository manager point of view. So we used all of that information that we gathered from those community calls and the expert group to draft a strategic vision. And then we sent it back out to the expert group for comment, and about a third of them responded with comments that were really helpful in creating a second draft that we then put out to the entire community to respond to. And that actually just ended on Friday, right before I came here. So I've only glanced at some of the comments so far, but we had a lot of, we had about 35 or so comments, I think. And then we created a Google form where people could submit things independent of like specific points in the text. And we had about 7 people submit comments that way. And then I hosted 2 live consultation sessions via Zoom, of course. And we had some very small but very mighty groups attend those that had lots of great thoughts, and we had lots of good discussions. And those were really valuable for me in thinking through some of the challenges as we try to finalize the vision. It's good to have that back and forth, as we've all found here, right? So what is the strategic vision that I speak of? So right now, caveat, we aren't finalized yet because we haven't gone through those public comment period comments. But this is where we stand right now. An interoperable network of repositories is an essential component of our national research infrastructure, offering seamless and open access to research. By working together, US repositories will also play a crucial role in the collective effort to transform global research communication into a more open and equitable system. So that's sort of the crux of the vision. And we have a bit more explanatory text that comes after that. But I also wanted to highlight here this set of foundational characteristics that came out of the discussions that we had throughout these past 9 months or so, as things that were really important, as things that we really take into account as we both build the vision and as we move forward into the action planning phase. That our planning is very cognizant of putting accessibility, collaboration, community governance, equity and inclusivity, et cetera, at the core of what we do in the network. So what's next? First, we have to process all those comments and come to a finalized vision. And these are some of the questions that are sort of going around in my head that I would love to hear from all of you if you have experience with this. And I know you all have more experience with this than we do. How you've thought about this, how you've gone about things. So thinking about how we scope the network. In our vision, we've said that we want to be inclusive of all US repositories, but there are always questions about what does that mean? Do you mean just institutional repositories? Do you mean also data repositories? Do you mean also not seated in a university repositories, like a research institute, things like that? And so we do want to include all of those things, but thinking about how broad the scope should be. For instance, one of the discussions that came up in one of our live consultation sessions was about whether this included repositories in the sense of digital special collections. So lots of universities in the US have special collections that they create primary source digital collections from, and are we talking about them too? And so thinking about how we scope the network. How we manage differing priorities, balancing both the local and the sort of global priorities around repositories. And also, I think, going to the theme of this meeting, there are different levels of prioritization or maybe appetite for how radical of a transformation we're trying to make. And so how do we bring all of those people together and benefit all of them and maybe be a little radical along the way. So, and the third question, as we were having discussions, people saw the technology piece in the vision, but not as much the sort of staffing human piece. So we need to look at how to bring that more obviously, more explicitly into the vision. And then how do we situate ourselves in this broader landscape? there are lots of organizations in the US, outside the US, that we could potentially partner with. And how do we, going back to the prioritization piece, how do I build the relationships, and how do we sequence that, and how do we fit in? What are the best places to start in terms of being part of that landscape without duplicating work or things like that. So if you have thoughts on any of these questions, I would be happy to hear about that. And then once we finalize that vision, we'll go into the action planning phase, where we think about what are we actually going to do to advance this vision that we've built together, and who will participate. We want to be inclusive, but of course not every institution is going to want to be an active working participant in the network, and how do we build that sort of core group of people that can, quite frankly, help me get things done, right? And then how will we sustain this work long term? How do we build a community governance structure that works for this network, that can keep the work going long term? And I think that's the end. So if you have questions or thoughts, Lautaro, I see you have something. And then I think Bianca, please.
Mine is a question. Are you thinking on building an aggregator for this network? Because for us, it was a good tool in order to engage repositories in a common project or environment. And it's a good tool also for diagnose what do you have in your network, the level of interoperability, the level of accomplishment of international guidelines. The aggregating content is a way for all of this, and also for a common environment for visibility of the different kind of repositories. And building an aggregator is not only about the technical thing, but it's also a political way to engage and to build a community. For that was our experience, at least. So that's my question.
Yeah, that's a great question. And the idea of discoverability did come up in all of the conversations we have. People want their content to be more discoverable. And you make a good point about that being a way to build a community. The way we've been thinking about it so far is that there are lots of aggregators where lots of US repositories appear already, and maybe we could partner with one of them to create sort of a US view without having to build an entire new aggregator for ourselves. But point taken about the community piece.
Yeah, I think that idea of engaging the community and actually doing something together is at the core of what you kind of just put forward. And I think any suggestions and all suggestions that folks have for that are fantastic. So really appreciate the suggestion.
Sure, yes. And the question is, are there open science barometers for each region? In France, they have a French barometer for open science.
No. I think France is probably one of the places that's farthest ahead around monitoring open science. I'm looking at my French colleagues, but I think there's discussions going on in different countries and regions, but okay, Natalia says there's open air observatory. Yeah, so I mean, there's various activities in different countries and different regions. Eloy has his hand up. Eloy, is this related specifically to what we're talking about now, or is it a question? Because Bianca had her hand up before you. So if this is related to what we're talking about now, I'll go to you. Okay. Bianca, por favor, hablas en español si quieres.
Ah, como todos saben, Brasil tiene también un tamaño continental. Entonces, la estrategia que hemos utilizado ha sido de crear redes regionales que entonces empezaron a buscar instituciones y empezar a convencer a estas instituciones a crear en los repositorios y utilizar una misma infraestructura nacional. Y les puedo decir que esto nos ha funcionado y viene funcionando muy bien. Solo una idea.
Brazil is a very large country, almost like a continent. And so their strategy has been to work at the regional level. So not the regional as in Latin America, but at the state or provincial level or specific regions. And that has worked very successfully for them. And then what they want to do is bring together those separate regions into a national, into a more cohesive national network. Eloy.
Okay, just two comments. One related with the question of monitoring. Natalie already talked about the Open Science Observatory, but also in the context of Open Air, we are setting up a group, a working group about open science monitoring, because I think this is a very important aspect, both to discuss the question of the indicators and also the tools to monitor those indicators. So what the question of what are we monitoring and how should we monitor? So the two issues we will try to address it, and of course I think it will be not only from the interest or from the point of view of Europe. So if there are other groups working on the same direction in other parts of the world, from the Open Air side, we will be very happy to liaise and engage with you. The other thing I really want to echo and strongly support Lautaro's comment. Our experience in Portugal, for me, the national portal, the discoverability is a side effect. The important role of the tool was to build the community. It was really instrumental. So, of course, our repositories are visible in Open Air, in Core, in Baich, in Google Scholar. But what brought the community together, what brought us using the same guidelines, what brought us having meetings, discussing technical problems that we share, etc., was the fact that we were building a tool. So think about it, not only from the discoverability point of view, but mainly from the community building point of view.
Los redes technical puede ayudar comenzar la comunidad de, sí. Okay, so do you want to, okay, and then I'll go over here, or there's a couple more hands up.
Just before I lose track, thank you for reiterating that. That it was an aspect of that I think we focused on the discoverability and not the community piece of an aggregator. And I think to what Bianca was saying, we have lots of library consortia in the US that may be able to play a role in helping us with this. And that's why we included a couple in the expert group. The consortia, though, are at different levels. There's state, there's regional. They all do different sorts of things. So not all of them are in the repository space. But I think we could be strategic about engaging some of those consortia to help build sort of that regional feeding into national network piece. Yeah, so thank you.
We are not moving there anymore. Ah, okay. Okay. So I should. Yeah, but they are there. So I don't. Okay. Um, thank you. Thank you for the presentation. Out of curiosity, I wanted to ask you if you think that publisher-led chorus initiative may pose a threat, if any, or you think it's not really an obstacle?
Who wants to talk about chorus? Heather.
Yes, I do think that the publisher-led chorus initiative is something that has a lot of visibility in the US, and it is something that we have to be, I think, absolutely intentional about creating. It's not just a narrative about equity and ownership of things like monitoring tools, the kinds of aggregation that they can provide versus things that are truly community-led and rooted in the kinds of values that I think the current administration wants to promote. I think there are valuable things that Chorus could provide. Nothing is all one way or another, but for sure it is something that we're paying really close attention to and looking at. I wouldn't say competing with, but making sure that we're providing, that what we ultimately can do is to provide something that maximizes their capacity to add positively to the landscape while minimizing the potential negative effects that we can so easily see that could occur.
Any other questions? Oh, Robin.
Thanks. So it sounds very exciting because you're at the beginning of something and challenging, and I'll look forward to hearing through CORE how it's going and developing. I just noticed one of your questions for the feedback was about staffing and things, and it occurred to me I might usefully mention a model we have in Scotland that my colleagues are involved in of a shared service. And I was just looking it up on Google to see sort of what the definition of that is, but and I'm getting kind of corporate answers, but for a single institution, but it might be a good model in this case for something like a shared help desk, because you have so many different kinds of repositories, so much diversity to deal with, or even possibly for the La Referencia models too, like having shared technical staff. And that's how we do it. And I mean, Scotland is a small country, not the size of a continent, but we do, we kind of run all the DSpace repositories with the technical staff at one institution. So it seems to be a good community where the users request things and they pay into it, and they basically pay the developers' salaries, and they have to take their turn to get their modifications on their repositories done. But on the other hand, the technical team have enough knowledge to make sure that the technology doesn't go out of date and the updates happen and all that. But so possibly for either group, that could, and I can put you in touch with the people who are actually involved with that. It's not me.
Yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Robin. And that shared service model is how a lot of the consortia in the US operate. But I'd be interested to see how the model might differ and how it might work outside of a set consortia in an environment like this. So